in response to 25% tariffs President Trump put into effect on foreign cars and car parts, automaker Stellantis announced a pause on production at some of its Canadian and Mexican assembly plants. And as a result, some temporary layoffs at the company's plants in Michigan and Indiana.
A breaking point for American business. How Trump's tariffs are reshaping global strategy. In a significant turn of events that signals more than just a temporary disruption, the business model for operating in the United States is beginning to unravel. On May 27, 2025, the long-feared storm of escalating tariffs, once just political thunder in the distance, finally broke ground, and it's already forcing some of the world's biggest corporations to take evasive action. In a single day, 5 of the world's largest corporations, spanning the automotive, tech, e-commerce, consumer goods, and industrial sectors, announced unprecedented changes to their U.S. operations. This wasn't about politics. It wasn't ideological. This was about raw economics. In the words of one industry analyst, tariffs just broke the business model. The immediate trigger. A sweeping 25% tariff was announced on all vehicles not manufactured within U.S. borders. But the reaction has gone far beyond the auto industry. 5 major companies, each from a different sector of the economy, have now reached the same conclusion. Remaining in the U.S. under current trade policies has become more expensive than leaving. This isn't about politics. It's not about protest. It's about survival. Stellantis hits the brakes on American production. Among the first to respond was Stellantis, the global automaker behind household names like Chrysler, Jeep, Ram, and Dodge. In a bold and sobering announcement, the company revealed it would temporarily idle several assembly lines and lay off over 900 workers across 5 U.S. plants. The reason was brutally simple. With the new tariffs pushing the cost of importing vehicles from foreign plants to unsustainable levels, some hitting 25%, Stellantis stated its North American production model was no longer viable. Half of the vehicles Stellantis sells in the U.S. are currently imported. The math simply stopped working. The company's U.S. president put it plainly. Stellantis was taking immediate operational action, a phrase that translates to halting production to stop financial hemorrhaging. The United Auto Workers Union was quick to condemn the layoffs, calling them a horrifying result of reckless tariff escalation. In their words, American workers are now paying the price for a global trade war they never agreed to fight. But this isn't just a labor issue. It's a broader signal that U.S. manufacturing is no longer immune to the shocks of international policy shifts. The assembly line, once the engine of middle-class stability, is now a pressure point. Apple begins a strategic exodus from China. Next came Apple, the tech giant whose global supply chain has long been a masterclass in international logistics. For years, Apple carefully hedged against tariff exposure by balancing Chinese production with smaller operations in India and elsewhere. But that strategy has reached its limits. In a telling development, Apple shipped more iPhones from India to the US than from China in April, a historic first, and the company has confirmed it will shift all iPhone production for the US market to India by next year. This isn't an experiment, it's a deliberate, large-scale migration. Apple CEO Tim Cook had warned earlier this month that most iPhones sold in the US would eventually be made in India. That eventually is now underway. Trump's new tariff plan is again the driving force. If an iPhone isn't made in the US, Apple now faces a 25% import duty. Rather than fight the tide, Apple is adapting rapidly. Factories in Chennai are now assembling devices that were previously produced in Shenzhen. Supply chains have shifted. Logistics have been retooled. Apple responded not with statements, but with shipments. This strategy isn't just defensive, it's visionary. It reflects the future of global production, resilient, diversified, and agile. The e-commerce model cracks. Shein and Temu restructure. The new tariff reality has also thrown a wrench into the high-speed e-commerce machines run by Shein and Temu, 2 of the fastest-growing online retailers in the US. These companies built their empires on a unique model, shipping low-value goods directly from Chinese factories to American consumers, all while taking advantage of the de minimis exemption for packages under $800. That loophole allowed them to bypass import taxes entirely, but now that exemption is gone. Every single package, regardless of value, faces full tariffs, some as high as 145%. Shein has already warned customers that product prices may increase, though it's trying to absorb costs internally. Temu, meanwhile, has dramatically changed course, shifting its logistics focus exclusively to products already housed in US warehouses to avoid import taxes altogether. Behind the scenes, both companies have paused major US ad campaigns and cut marketing budgets. Smaller international players like UK-based Space NK and Canadian lingerie startup Understance have pulled out of the US market entirely. The consequence is clear. The fast, cheap e-commerce pipeline from China to American doorsteps has been severed. Toy maker MGA Entertainment moves production out of China. In the consumer products arena, MGA Entertainment, the company behind beloved brands like Bratz Dolls and LOL Surprise Toys, isn't waiting for tariffs to climb higher. It's acting now. Citing unsustainable costs, the California-based toy maker announced it is moving 40% of its toy production out of China to factories in India, Vietnam, and Indonesia. This marks a dramatic shift for a company that supplies mass-market retailers like Walmart, Target, and Amazon. For parents, the impact may be subtle but significant. Higher toy prices, reduced availability, and a holiday season filled with stockouts. For competitors, MGA's move is a flashing neon sign. Avoiding tariffs is no longer theoretical, it's operationally essential. Alcoa redirects aluminum exports from Canada to Europe. Lastly, in the industrial sector, American aluminum giant Alcoa is also redrawing its logistical map. Historically, its Canadian smelters fed a significant portion of US demand, but new import taxes on Canadian aluminum have rendered that pipeline economically unfeasible. So Alcoa is rerouting those shipments to Europe, where trade conditions are more stable and predictable. The company is also exploring increased aluminum exports from Australia to serve US customers more cost-effectively. While Alcoa calls this optimization, the underlying truth is stark. Canada to US is no longer the default path. A pivotal shift in business strategy. 5 companies, 5 industries, 5 seismic adjustments, all driven by one factor: tariffs. What was once promoted as a strategic tool to protect American industry is now exposing it to new levels of instability. These corporate decisions aren't political statements. They're cold calculations about costs, forecasts, logistics, and market access. Executives aren't wondering what the president meant. They're doing the math on the next round of tariffs, figuring out how much more it will cost to stay, and asking a harder question: where else can we go? In today's climate, the most precious commodity in business isn't tax relief, labor costs, or consumer loyalty. It's stability, something the US marketplace increasingly struggles to offer. What does it all mean? For the average American, the effects of these shifts are already being felt, though not always recognized. Your smartphone may cost more. That holiday toy may be out of stock. The aluminum in your new appliance might come with a 10% markup. The SUV you plan to buy might be delayed or imported at a higher price. Across 5 different industries, one message is clear: tariffs are no longer a tool. They're a threat to operational sustainability, a threat to job security, a threat to America's role as a global business hub. These aren't public relations stunts or political statements. They're financially driven survival strategies. Companies are acting now because they can no longer afford to wait. What was once considered just talk is now real. The tariffs have teeth, and they're biting deep. Tariffs don't just affect corporations, they affect shelves, delivery times, and price tags. Behind every product, there's now a tariff, and behind every tariff, a decision: the road ahead, adapt or depart. Some of the changes we're witnessing are permanent, others may be reversible if trade policies change, but they all carry a common message: American competitiveness is no longer guaranteed. Corporations are no longer tethered by loyalty, they're mobile by necessity, and when trade policies become unpredictable or punitive, they do what they must to survive. They adapt, they leave, they restructure. What we're seeing is not the end, it's the beginning. A long goodbye to a global business environment that once considered the United States a default destination. Now, executives are asking a different question: is it still worth it? Today, 5 major companies answered that question. Tomorrow, many more will follow. Not with protests, not with outrage, but with paperwork, logistics, and departure. America is no longer assumed to be the default. In the new global economy, flexibility wins, loyalty is optional, and tariffs, they are the new cost of doing business.